Welcome back to the bullshit filter.
Oh yeah.
This is episode 2 of our series on fascism. What is it? What does it look like? Is the United States fascist? Is Donald Trump fascist? If so, why? If so, is that a bad thing?
What is it good for?
In our first episode,
right.
we talked about epistemology and heuristics and a little bit about Trotsky's view on fascism. And at the end of that, I said, I want to go back and look at the history of why and how fascism arose in the early 20th century, because I think it's important to understand the historical and the social roots of fascism so we can better understand why it emerged in the early 20th century. But also then we can take that map and overlay the United States in the last 30 years and see how the Venn diagram lines up.
I like that. Can I make a suggestion? So this
No, shut the fuck up.
Okay. Well, that
okay.
was hurtful. Okay. So this is for you and for the listeners, because we're about to talk about the history of fascism. We don't know what each other has in our notes. We don't, we didn't like compare.
You have
sources.
Notes?
I have a note. So let's not harp on that. The point I want to make is let's try something. So as we're going to, to a degree, as we go through here and we're going to talk about the history of fascism, obviously chronologically to the best of our ability, we can compare, like, I can show you my first card. The first thing I have is in the 1880s. I was wondering what your first, like a boom, 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 whatever, just an idea.
1790s
Fuck.
For me. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you win round one. Okay, that's fine. No, but just so we're all on the same page, because I just want everybody to know that we don't know what each other's going to say. It doesn't matter, because we just have a good time talking to each other. And then we say bad things to each other when the cameras are off. But anyway, please go ahead with your notes.
Look, you can go back to ancient Sparta,
Exactly.
and ancient Rome,
right?
For the backstory on this. We know that the fasces come from ancient Rome. We've talked about that endlessly on our Rome series.
Right.
Ancient Sparta had this disciplined militarism that emphasized racial purity and warrior culture and all those sorts of things. But really, without getting crazy about it, you want to look at the 18th and 19th centuries as the modern world was being reshaped by revolution and the rise of nationalism. And, I think the start of it was really the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The Jacobins in the French Revolution. In the 1790s, the Jacobin movement showed how a revolutionary government could mobilize a mass movement with total commitment to an ideology.
Right.
Which is something that the French thinker Georges Valois later said foreshadowed the fascist idea of a totalistic state. There was the leaders of the Jacobins, Robespierre, Marat, and Danton, really were able to take the working classes and the middle classes and mobilize them against the French nobility, the French elite. It was slightly different. Like the American Revolution had a different tone. The American Revolution was about breaking away from the British monarchy.
Right.
And being tax dodgers as a country, an official country dedicated to being tax dodgers.
That's our official policy. Yes.
Yeah. French was obviously a different situation, but the Jacobins believed in popular sovereignty and that political legitimacy came from the people.
Yes.
And then you have historians that look towards that and say that was the beginnings of really the people arcing up and fighting back against the elite and blaming their problems on a certain class of people. Fascism inherited the notion of politics as a mass civic religion from the Jacobins.
Right.
And I do like that term, a mass civic religion, because when I look at MAGA Trumpism,
Right.
it does seem to be a mass civic religion. These MAGA folks have a religious belief
Oh, it's
in Trump.
passionate.
And it's,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, he is basically a messianic figure for them because, and I've had these discussions with Australian Trump supporters.
Right.
You can show them a list of his flaws and his crimes and, all of that. They don't care. It's all like, la, 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 don't care, don't believe any of it.
Right.
It's exactly the same as talking to a Christian about all of the problems in the Bible or Christian logic, or talking to a Mormon about Joseph Smith being a career fraudster before he invented the church, or a Scientologist about L. Ron Hubbard.
Right.
Facts don't matter. It's just about belief. It's a religion.
And
right?
excuses. It's like the preacher who used to be a drug addict and a whoremonger. I've been down on your level, and it's a part of their journey. It's a part of their story, and they're forgiven because these people want. Maybe you can describe it better than me. When I can look at you and all of your flaws, they go, nope, that's my guy. That's my guy. It is worshipful. It's godlike or whatever,
It's love.
Love.
Like, we're all married to people that aren't perfect and have a lot of flaws.
So not
and
perfect.
we stick with them anyway.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Exactly.
It's a form of love.
That's true.
And it's nice to love. People feel good about the fact that they love someone despite their flaws.
Right.
And people, MAGA supporters love Trump.
Oh, they do.
The fascists, of course, hated the liberal democracy of the Jacobins.
Yes.
But it was this aspect of a political holy war, mass mobilization and a political holy war that they took from the Jacobins.
Mm.
But if you cast your mind back to the early 1800s, there was a bunch of things going on that led to fear and anxiety and discontent in people in Europe. You had the Industrial Revolution that had changed what had been the way of doing things for ever, thousands of years.
Yes.
A bit like AI and robotics is going to reshape everything in the next 10 years.
Right.
So you had Industrial Revolution was changing the nature of work, the nature of life, really. People were moving into cities. They were getting jobs in dirty factories. People that never had money now had money. People that used to have money now didn't have money.
Right.
It was complicated. It was difficult.
Yeah.
Everything was being upended.
Yes.
You had the spread of liberal ideas started by the American Revolution, then the French Revolution. Not everyone welcomed those changes. Not only the elite and the church that were pushing back on these things, but you had even members of the working classes and the middle classes that believed in king and country and fully embraced the idea that God wanted things to be this way and that's how they should remain and we shouldn't change, or we shouldn't change too quickly.
Exactly.
So there was the Enlightenment, and then there was the Counter-Enlightenment, conservative revolution pushing back on the liberal ideas. Yeah, you had people of the upper classes, the elite, that resented the rise of individualism and capitalism. Like the elite that had generational wealth, landed gentry, had lands that had been given to them by monarchs that had been in their family for generations.
Right.
They didn't like the rise of the middle class. All of a sudden, you have these shopkeepers and guilds and lawyers and accountants that were making money and able to buy property and join the nice clubs.
Well, not only that, but then you had, and you were touching on this a second ago. I mean, we've all read stories, we've all seen TV shows, and we've all seen this in history books or whatever, in whatever form, is that you have aristocracy suddenly out of money for whatever reason. A lot of it is bad management, and suddenly they have to marry their daughter off to the shopkeeper's son because that's going to be an infusion of cash, which they don't have anymore. It truly was a topsy-turvy world. And just for me, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but for me, one of the greatest indications of how far or how well entrenched this idea that things shouldn't change, that this is the way God wanted it to be, when you were an aristocrat or you were a noble or whatever, you literally thought the blood that flowed through your veins somehow, don't ask me how, was superior to the guy, cleaning up crap or feeding your pigs or cutting your, whatever. I mean, you were literally better in almost every way possible. You had noble blood, and for things to start changing, there's going to be like you said, a very strong reaction to that.
And it wasn't just the elite that were pushing back. There were artists and philosophers that weren't happy about progress, the fact that everything was turning into cement and steel and factories. There was they wanted to get back to an organic form of life, leaves of grass, Walt Whitman, these sorts of things. We need to get back to nature. We need to get back to community. We need to get back to... It's like the same thing I hear from Chrissy and people today complaining about social media and AI, and we're not really talking to real people, and humans are a social species, and we need to be talking to real people and not AI bots and that kind of stuff, although she's on AI all day long.
Right.
There was also people that wanted to get back to a sense of strong authority. They, as I said before, they sort of liked the structure and the stability of king and country and the church and those sorts of things, and thought that was important and we shouldn't change. This whole idea of parliamentary politics and the masses having some opinions on how things worked was very dangerous.
Right.
The madness of the crowds and that sort of thing. You had nationalist philosophers like Johann Fichte and Hegel, who were glorifying the state in sort of almost mythical terms that fascist thinkers would later borrow from. Fichte was a student of Kant. He came up with some interesting ideas that the individual could only exist in relation to others. He said that, and he wrote a book in 1797, Foundations of Natural Right, where he said that self-consciousness is a social phenomenon.
Right.
And I tend to agree. My non-dualism history and that sort of philosophy says that we create our identity as an individual as a subject versus object duality. It can only exist if we are comparing me to the other, me to you, me to the rest of society.
Right.
If you just see everything as a oneness, then there's no opportunity for individualism. It can only be expressed in the form of some sort of subjective interpretation of everyone else in your society.
Mm-hmm.
He gave a series of speeches, though, Fichte, called Addresses to the German Nation, where he urged German nationalism to fight against Napoleon. And of course, Napoleon plays a big role in the rise of all of this. Napoleon was able to take this mass movement of the Jacobins and the revolution that went awry in France, got very, very violent and out of control. He was able to come in, harness that, direct that, and then, as he was pushing back against the monarchies of Europe that were attacking France to try and reinstall the Bourbon monarchy, he was spreading those ideas of the people and the people rising up and taking control, whilst also making sure that he had an iron fist on control of France and most of Europe at the same time. It was a balancing act.
Exactly. And he did it well. Yeah.
And, he inadvertently caused these nationalistic feelings to arise in Germany and Italy because they were still fragmented. France was able to focus its energies, as people probably know. Germany wasn't unified and Italy weren't unified until the mid to late 19th centuries. So it was hard for them to get their shit together to fight back against a power like France and even England that had a lot more focus and energy.
Yes.
Hegel talked a lot about the state and the idea of a nation of people as being the important thing, or the Volk, the folk. People bound together with a language and a culture and a shared spirit, the Volksgeist.
Right.
Not the Poltergeist, the Volksgeist.
That comes later. Yeah.
And he argued that individuals should find their highest freedom through loyalty to the state, not against it. And this reminds me a lot of ancient Athens.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this on our shows over the years. You go back to pre-Alexander Athens, there was no idea of the individual, as I understand it, in ancient Athens. If you were a white man,
Right.
a citizen with property, you saw yourself as the state. Your whole purpose
Mm-hmm.
was to work towards the enduring success of Athens.
Yeah.
Not for yourself. You would be looked after.
Right.
But your job was to support Athens. And in the early part of the Roman Republic, too, there was that feeling that the success of Rome was the most important thing. That was the success of everybody, right?
Yes.
It was the success of the tribe, the success of the city and the city-state. You were part of that. It wasn't this individualistic thing, well, fuck the state.
Right.
As long as I'm doing okay,
Yeah.
who gives a fuck how everyone else is doing, right?
I think there was a time of Gaius Marius and the brothers Gracchi where individual agendas started coming to the fore, to the point where there were violent fights in public in the forum. I mean, yeah, so it went from what is good for Rome to what is good for me. People obviously have a very different opinion of that, and that leads to strife. So yeah, that's kind of where it starts to break down. Because yeah, it literally was Greece and Rome. It literally was, what is good? If it's good for the state, it must be good for me because I'm a part of the state. So, but somewhere along the way, human frailties or whatever you want to call it gets in the way. And we're going to see this with as we go through the fascism, because there's a point I'm trying to remember. It's Mussolini's talking about this. Is talking about struggle is what you have to struggle if you're human. And since nations are made up of humans, they struggle too, and they struggle against each other. So it's the survival of the fittest. It's Darwinism. We'll get into all that. But yeah, it goes back to what you were saying earlier. Violence is inherent in this system.
I think the movement from thinking of ourselves as the state to individualism
Mm-hmm.
Started actually when Alexander died, and
Good
his
Yeah.
successors started making themselves individual kings of all of these areas.
Right.
There was no longer an opportunity to think of yourself as the state, because you now had a king, and the king had a court, and the people were a small group
Yeah.
of people were running things. So for the rest of them, they started to go, okay, well, how do I find meaning in my life now when I don't have any power in the state?
Right.
And that was when things like Stoicism and Epicureanism started to emerge in Athens, ideas that had come back from Alexander's sojourns into India. So there's a little bit of Hindu thought came back into Greece, merged with through syncretism with Greek philosophical thought, and became, okay, well, how do I be happy? What is the meaning of life? How do I find peace and happiness for myself?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another story.
Right.
So Hegel starts talking about national spirit, shared language, shared culture, and sort of the Volksgeist, the spirit of the people, their ethnic identity. That starts to become a big part of thinking throughout Europe. Then you sort of get to Otto von Bismarck, who we mentioned in our last episode.
Mm-hmm.
He really showed how you could forge unity in a people by focusing against common enemies.
Oh, brilliant.
In his case, Catholics, socialists, and you could rally a people by focusing them against what he considered were the enemies of the people. There's a direct line, I think, from Bismarck through to Hitler by focusing people's energies on the things you can blame for the problems, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he was good. And I don't want to take this idea too far, because years ago I read a biography on Bismarck and I was just blown away. But for him, it was almost like just the point. I mean, yes, he had a philosophy, and yes, he had stuff he would rather have in place than not. But his thing was to always win, always to be the one in power. So then you can control. So even if you lose short term, you can win long term. So again, he was just a brilliant tactician. who would distract people with enemies. He would make stuff up. He would sometimes compromise just to give them, the opposing sides, a little bit of what they wanted, so it calmed them down. He was a master at that, and he's the one, obviously, who's going to help, more than anybody else, unify Germany and make it the powerhouse, or let it become the powerhouse that it is. But he was one of the best in a good and bad way, all at the same time.
Yeah, so for people who aren't familiar with the history of Germany in that period, it wasn't a single country. It was a patchwork of kingdoms and duchies and free cities that had been around for centuries since the breakup of the Roman Empire. And he was able to unify all of these states under Prussia, except for Austria.
Mm-hmm.
He used a strategy called blood and iron. It was war, industrial strength, not nice talks or speeches. It was about force,
power politics,
to bring all of this together. And he believed in realpolitik, right? It was pragmatic. It was politics based on the ruthless use of power. And he mastered the art of creating enemies to unify the people. It was the liberals, the socialists, the Catholics, and he was very good at it. He was sort of, he led the way for other people to focus the enemies. Like, not a new thing, obviously.
Right.
But the way that he did it was a new tactic for unifying a people. But he, as you said, he also took ideas from his enemies and used them for his own benefit. He actually created the first welfare state.
Yes.
Not because he really believed in welfare, but it was a way of undermining his socialist opponents.
It was popular.
He introduced health insurance in 1883, accident insurance in 1884, old age pensions in 1889.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the socialists were pushing for those things, and it was like, okay, well, how do I remove their power? I'll do it. Right?
Boom. Yeah. Who do you have to thank? Me, moi. And now they don't have anything to rally against. I mean, just fuck it. Again, that's when you can literally check your ego and go, what does it take for me to stay in position or in power or whatever? And he did that time and time again.
He wasn't a fascist. He was a conservative monarchist who distrusted the mob, mass politics.
Yeah.
But his methods kind of prefigured fascist strategies. He had nationalism built around external wars and humiliation of enemies, internal and external, lots of internal scapegoats.
Yeah.
Prioritizing the state above the individual, demanding loyalty from the citizens, and using social programs not to empower workers, but to neutralize them so they wouldn't organize.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which capitalists have learned from too over the years as well. Like, give people just enough of a pay rise to shut them up for a while.
Exactly.
Not enough so they can actually afford to buy anything, but just enough so you can say, look, I just gave you something. Like, what's your problem?
You should be happy now. In Western Germany, in Essen, there was the arms manufacturer family, the Krupps. And Bismarck worked hand in hand with them because they became the largest arms manufacturer, if not in Europe, then certainly in Germany. And Bismarck worked with them hand in glove. What do we got to do to keep your people humble, but also hardworking? And the Krupp, whoever was in charge at the time, copied Bismarck. He gave them retirement, he gave them pensions, he gave them medical. They built up little shops you could go into and spend Krupp dollars. I mean, you give them a little so they don't ask for more. And again, it's just one of the tactics that fascists and other forms of government use as well. But these people are the ones who, it already existed, but these are like people like Bismarck are the ones who put it on the map.
And then they partnered with the Nazis, didn't they? The Krupps?
Oh, hand in glove, baby. Yes.
So that was Bismarck's role. Mm-hmm. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there was sort of this widespread crisis in the late 19th century against modernity.
Mm-hmm.
The fin de siècle, the end of the century feeling that it was spread with sort of disillusionment with the promises of progress. a lot of artists and philosophers very active in this period, like unhappy about what they saw as materialism and rationalism of the bourgeois liberal society. There was a lot of ennui, cynicism, pessimism,
Right.
sort of a widespread belief that civilization was just becoming more and more decadent and that it was not going in the right direction.
But could I just emphasize real quick? So everything you just said, again, it's not like these people are going, oh, well, they're doing something different than me. I don't like it. Let's crush that. That's not what it is. Everything Cam just said, they summed up as a crisis. This is literally, we are going in the wrong direction as a country, culturally, which will affect us economically. We're getting, too soft or whatever. And so, and there was other elements to this. There was Darwin biology, survival of the fittest. There was Nietzsche, the Superman, about life is meant to be struggled. And there are people who are willing to walk away from the comforts of life to just accept everything they've been told, come up with their own ideas, and imprint through will to power on their surroundings, kind of remake their surroundings the way they want to through force. But again, they literally saw things as going the wrong direction, and they were willing to use power and violence to try to change it. And there's other ideas that get implemented in there as well. But this is where, nope, we're going the wrong way. Somebody has to do something.
I see the analog these days with people who have that same sort of concern about social media and technology and AI and robots.
Yeah.
We have this general sense of fear and anxiety, I think, about where society is headed, that you got a handful of tech billionaires that are determining the course of the future, and people aren't really sure that they want to go there, but they feel powerless over it.
Right. Can I just ask real quick, for people like that, and this goes back to what these people see a problem, they want to fix it. The people today who you were just describing, yes, I can see them being upset. I can see them being afraid. A few people are controlling things, but I'm always confused by that because it's not like AI is going anywhere. It's not like we're all going to take a vote. Okay, nope, that scares us. That's gone. It's not, if anything, it's going to become more prevalent. I don't know. I mean, I guess these people just either learn to adapt or they start living more and more in an isolated world, because stuff like in robotics, which you mentioned earlier, it's only going to become more. It's not going anywhere. I just wonder how people, I guess it just scares them and they don't know what to think or how to deal with it. I always found that fascinating. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off track.
So back to the artists.
Please.
If you think of Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Oscar Wilde, these guys were all in different ways expressing sort of concern and dissatisfaction with the rise of modernity. I think the key one I always go back to is The Scream by Edvard Munch, the painting in 1893, sort of this existential dread on the character just screaming at what's happening around him. Sort of the epitome of this existential dread that people were feeling at the time about how life was changing, how society was changing.
Right.
So the major political theme of the late 19th century was this revolt against materialism, rationalism, bourgeois society, liberal democracy. And a lot of the people embraced emotion, irrationalism, and myth over reason.
Right.
Sound familiar?
I'm trying to keep a straight face. Right. Yeah. And that, I mean, that seems weird, odd, stupid, naive to me, but I guess if you push someone enough, they're going to reach, like a drowning man will grab at the tip of a sword, right? I don't know. Are they just reacting to what they're seeing and that they don't like?
I think it's easier for some people to find comfort in emotion, irrationalism, and myth rather than deal with the realities and the complexities of how the world is changing.
It takes courage.
It's the emotional equivalent of sticking your fingers in your ears and going la 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 la. I don't hear it. It's not happening.
And for some people, that's a way of life or a way of coping, I guess would be better.
Yeah, it's a way of coping.
Yeah.
Yeah, with anxiety and the inability to handle. It's like Chrissy with American political news. She does not want to know what's going on in the US.
I don't blame her.
It's just too, she just can't deal with it.
It's too
It's like
much.
too overwhelming for
Yes.
her
Yes.
to have to, deal with the reality of what a clusterfuck it is. She'd rather just tune it out, right? Pretend it's not happening.
And she lives over there, so it's possible. But I can see how it would easily stress her out just to get 5 minutes of news over here.
But so those people were like a lot of people in America today, but unlike the USA today, these people denounced liberal individualism.
Right.
And yearned for a stronger sense of community and belonging, where the US, like the MAGA crowd over there, are all about individualism. Get your hands off my guns, get your hands off my healthcare, get your hands off my job. It's not about building a stronger sense of community. It's about me.
Yeah.
And get your filthy immigrant feet off my lawn kind of thing.
Pretty much.
But they did believe that civilization was in a state of decay and needed a complete rebirth, which ties into the whole fascist ideology. Things are going in the wrong direction. We need to make a violent break with the direction things are headed in and have a rebirth. Get back to the good old days.
Basics.
Right?
Yeah, well, the important stuff. Yeah. Okay.
So all of this stuff led the cultural groundwork for fascism. Charles Darwin, you mentioned before, social Darwinism, ideas of natural selection. A lot of religious thinkers pushed back against that, but other people applied it to human societies with this sort of Darwinist worldview, social Darwinist worldview, that some people were stronger and meant to survive more than others.
Right.
Pseudo-scientific racism used to justify racism. Writers like Arthur de Gobineau legitimized thinking in terms of superior and inferior races.
Mm-hmm.
He was a French writer and diplomat who basically introduced scientific race theory and racial demography, and talked about the Aryan master race and Nordicism. He was an elitist who, in the aftermath of the revolution of 1848, wrote an essay on the equality of the human races, on the inequality of the human races, He argued that aristocrats were superior to commoners because they possessed more Aryan genetic traits and had less interbreeding with inferior races.
Okay.
Lots of interbreeding, but it was all interbreeding amongst good, strong,
right,
Aryan.
That's the good
members
kind
of the family.
The good kind of interbreeding. I think you'll find the good kind.
Interestingly, he was French, but his writings and his theories weren't received very well in France. But certain Americans, pro-slavery Americans like Josiah Nott and Henry Hotz, picked it up, translated his book into English, and ran with it to justify slavery. They omitted about 1,000 pages of his original book, though, because it was quite long, several volumes, including the parts of the book where he described Americans as a racially mixed population and therefore inferior to the rest of the world.
Yeah, got to take that out. That's got to go.
Yeah. What percentage Navajo are you?
Cherokee. Thank you very much. 25%. But now that I've been reading about fascism and I'm scared for the future, I was making that all up. I'm 100% white. I'm white as the day is long. I'm just cornbread white. Don't listen to any of that stuff. I said, please don't come after me. I'm ice. Please don't come. Anyway, so yeah, no, 25% Cherokee. I tried to use it more to get a free college, but that didn't. Anyway, so it's done me no good. It's done me no good.
Oh, don't get me started on the Native Americans. Oh my God.
Anyway, moving on.
Gobineau was the first to theorize that race was the deciding factor in history.
Here we go.
And the Nazis picked that up and ran with it.
Right.
There were other new theories of mass psychology coming out of the time. Gustave Le Bon, who did his study of crowd behavior, the crowd study of the popular mind, 1895, one of the seminal works of crowd psychology. He then went on and started Duran Duran, but he's best known, I think, for his work on crowd behavior.
Good call.
And in that, he stated that crowds could be manipulated. He said that there were several characteristics of crowd psychology: impulsiveness, irritability, incapacity to reason, the absence of judgment of the critical spirit, the exaggeration of sentiments, and others. He wrote, an individual immersed for some length of time in a crowd soon finds himself, either in consequence of magnetic influence given out by the crowd, or from some other cause of which we are ignorant, in a special state, which much resembles the state of fascination in which the hypnotized individual finds himself in the hands of the hypnotizer.
Ooh, someone who will point them in a certain way to get them to do a certain thing. I guess this is where the dynamic leader starts to come into play.
Yeah, well, there were these ideas during the liberal Enlightenment that voters made rational choices. But he's saying if you can get a charismatic leader, they can whip a crowd into an irrational frenzy.
Gotcha.
And by the way, this is true in investing. Like, there's this theory in investing that the market has access to information, and so everyone's making rational decisions and everything is priced in.
Right.
And what Tony has taught me on QAV over the years is that's bullshit. People are still ruled by fear and greed.
Yeah.
They like to think of themselves as rational, but they aren't. And so what we try and do is overlay a scientific basis for investing that removes our own fear and greed and teaches us just to invest based on the numbers, not based on, fear and greed, basically.
Yeah. That's got to be challenging, to say the least. Sorry, go ahead.
Like, read any book by a successful investor, and they'll talk about how the biggest thing that leads to failure in most investors is following the crowd, buying something like crypto because everyone else is doing it, so I don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
Or selling because everyone else is selling, even though you have no rational basis for selling. It's just everyone else is selling. I better sell too. I don't want to be the person who held on and everyone laughs at me later, right?
Exactly. Yeah, fear.
By the way, the editor of the Polish critical edition of Mein Kampf believes that Adolf Hitler spent most of his time in prison in 1924 reading Gustave Le Bon's book on crowd psychology.
Oh, wow. Well, if
studying it.
If he did, he certainly got his money's worth out of it. Let's be honest. Yeah.
You mentioned Nietzsche earlier on. Nietzsche, obviously one of the big thinkers of the time. He condemned mass democracy and Christian humility as being weakness.
Yes.
He celebrated the Übermensch, the strong-willed Superman. He scorned herd mentality. And he sort of built on these heroic anti-egalitarian themes: aggressive nationalism, racism, the cult of strength and vitality. All of these things were floating around Europe in lots of different ways, and a fear of the direction that we were heading in.
Right.
And all of these things started to be brought together in the early 20th century. You had in France the revolutionary syndicalist Georges Sorel, who talked about the redemptive power of political violence and myth. 1908, he wrote Reflections on Violence that argued that the general strike could serve as the grand myth to inspire workers to overthrow bourgeois society. He talked about the emotional power of myth and spoke about the need for a kind of political religion to replace the talk that just went on, the endless talk in a liberal democracy. You needed some sort of religious myth-based power to get people focused and moving in a certain direction. He started on the radical left, but became disillusioned with the left's failures, and by 1909 had sort of drifted towards the radical right. He began advocating an alliance of nationalists and syndicalists taking the energy of the trade union activism and merging it with the anti-democratic goals of the ultra-nationalists, advocated organizing violent uprisings to save the world from barbarism, and equated violence with life and creativity and virtue, things that you said that Mussolini bought into. That, again, this gets back to social Darwinism, that life is about struggle.
Right.
It's claw against claw, tooth against tooth, and only the strong survive kind of thing. He separated the ideas. I was reading his book. He separated the ideas of violence and force. Violence is a spontaneous, criminal, illegitimate action against the current state power. Force is the movement of the state. It's organized, it's legal, it's under the direction and in the interests of the state, preserving the structure and the security of the state. So violence is chaotic, but force is disciplined and focused towards maintaining the power of the state, in his view.
Yeah, it's a scalpel. So
I've got a quote I pulled out of his book.
Go ahead.
Sorry. He says a distinction should be drawn between the force that aims at authority, endeavoring to bring about an automatic obedience, and the violence that would smash that authority. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned Georges Sorel, and there was another French monarchist, reactionary monarchist, Charles Maurras, and a fusion of their ideas. Maurras was like, we need organic unity, again, based on race or ethnicity. Then you've got Sorel saying violence is acceptable. And there was a fusion of their ideas that influenced the Italian nationalist Enrico Corradini, who was and he wanted to set up a movement in Italy. And so he's getting all these ideas from people about life is a struggle, violence is okay, to a degree, ethnic purity. And I don't know if you want to call it the ingredients of fascism is coming together. And he's going to be one of the guys who's going to start his own party. I'm not sure if we're going to get that tonight, but this is kind of the ideas that he's reading about and he's bringing into his own philosophy. And he's like you were just saying about Sorel, he's actually going to move on it and act as opposed to just sitting around bitching and talking about it.
Yeah, Enrico Corradini was pushing for a nationalist syndicalist movement led by an elite vanguard that rejected Marxist thought, rejected democracy, and fought to make Italy great. He labeled Italy a proletariat nation. He said you have the proletariat in a country, the workers that are oppressed by the wealthy. Then you have a proletariat nation that is oppressed by wealthier nations.
Right.
And he said Italy had become a proletariat nation.
Yeah.
It needed to fight back and get back the power. And there was some truth to this. So we've talked about this on the Cold War show over the years. I'm not sure how well it's understood, but in the 18th and 19th centuries, some of the major countries were able to expand their influence around the world through colonialism and the great game in Asia and Africa, to build global trading blocs that brought them massive wealth and for military power. Some had built those up and then squandered them or failed, like Spain.
Right.
Spain had been a major global power and then had stumbled. Its empire collapsed in the 19th century, initially because of Napoleon, and then Latin American revolutions against their foreign holdings, and then the United States coming in, as we've been talking about on our Cuban series,
right,
coming in and putting the nails in the coffin and taking over the Spanish colonial possessions in the Pacific,
right,
in the Atlantic. Then you had some like France and Britain that had done better. They had massive colonial empires and trading blocs. Britain obviously dominated the 19th century. Industrial revolution came out of there. They had massive navy. They had India. They had basically this massive empire and trading bloc that brought them huge amounts of wealth and power. France was more mixed. They lost to Britain big time in the 18th century. Then Napoleon fought back, but Napoleon was defeated. Then they were humiliated by Prussia in 1870. They had colonial expansion, though, into Africa and into China. That was more about recovering prestige than building raw power.
Yeah.
Germany and Italy didn't get any of that, didn't get in on any of that.
They missed the bus.
They unified late.
Right.
Yeah. Germany unified in 1871. By then, Africa and Asia had been mostly carved up. Bismarck was initially pretty ambivalent about colonies, only started jumping in the 1880s, but by then it was too late to really get a foothold in building that sort of global footprint that you needed to have economic power in the 19th century. Italy was even worse off. They unified in 1861. They were poor, they were fractured, they had a weak navy, limited industrial base. You know, Italy's never really been that great as an agricultural region on a large scale, a lot of mountains. The Romans had to bring in their grain from Egypt and Asia and
North Africa,
different things in different parts of the Middle East, Syria.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Italy's colonial ventures hadn't been very successful either. When they did get involved, Eritrea, Somalia, then huge humiliation in Ethiopia and Atwa in 1896. They were the only European colonial power in the 19th century to be defeated by an African army, which was a bad look.
Right.
So Germany and Italy missed out. You had Britain, France, Spain, to a lesser extent in terms of its long-term success at it, and then the United States coming in the late 19th, early 20th century, picking up a lot of these regions, and they'd obviously taken control of large parts of Mexico, said, well, this is ours now. They were able to expand their territory within the regions of their continent,
right,
which was more difficult for the Europeans to do.
Yeah.
So Germany and Italy in the late 19th, early 20th century were fucked economically because they hadn't been able to get away with the huge land grab that the Europeans and the Americans had been doing up until that point.
Yeah.
That brings us to Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, one of the leaders of the futurist movement in Italy. So we talked about you had all of these artists and thinkers that were fighting against modernism and progress. You had the counter movement to that said, that embraced it, where no, modernism is great.
Right.
We want more modern stuff. They're like people like me that jump on board with AI and robotics and like, fucking bring it on.
That's right.
Let's
ride this wave.
Tear everything down and replace it with, humans aren't doing a great job. We need a new superior form of intelligence to take over. Let's get there as quickly as we can.
We've had our run.
Quick end run.
We had a good run. Let's just give it over to the machines now. Come on. What do you say? What do you say?
So Marinetti wrote the Manifesto of Futurism, which was written and published in 1909, basically exalted speed, machinery, youth, war, said Italy should get rid of all of its old art and all of its old architecture and traditions and just fuck all that shit.
Right.
Burn it down, rebuild itself as a modern nation, a modern country, creativity and aggression. Let's just get in there and reinvent Italy, make Italy great again.
My favorite thing was when he said we should train young men. Young men should have a lot of physical training, and women shouldn't be anywhere near that because it's going to get messy and there's going to be fighting and they're going to be. He had these weird. This part was weird to me, but he's like, life is a struggle. We need to get our young men up and buff so they can be ready to kick ass and take names and leave the women in the kitchen.
Yeah, I got a quote from the Futurist Manifesto. We want to glorify war, the only cure for the world. Militarism, patriotism, the destructive gesture of the anarchists, the beautiful ideas which kill and contempt for woman.
War as the solution. Huh. There's an idea.
Viva l'Italia.
Okay.
He wanted a modern democracy that was dynamic, get rid of the mediocrities, the best of the best, let's go. And the futurists weren't fascists per se, but they did prime a generation to worship violence, masculinity,
The
and the
ideas.
nation's rebirth through struggle.
Absolutely.
And then he joined forces with the fascists. He saw Mussolini as sort of the realization of the militant dreams that he had. And by the eve of World War I, all of the ingredients for fascism were sort of on the table. You had this strident nationalism, racism, a cult of youth and violence, a hatred of liberal democracy and leftist class politics,
Yeah.
a desire for a socialist rebirth, a reinvention, a renaissance, if you will, a new Italian renaissance. And the idea of mobilizing the masses through a combination of myth and emotion.
Mm.
And then after World War I, they wrote, Marinetti and others wrote the Fascist Manifesto, or the Manifesto of the Italian Fasces of Combat.
Ooh.
Il Manifesto dei Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, which I have in the Italian, and I was going to read it to you in the Italian, but I thought that was too wanky. So now that I can actually read Italian,
Nice.
but I'm going to give it to you in English.
All right.
Movement was founded, the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, the Italian Fasces of Combat, by Mussolini, 1919. And here is I think we'll finish with this. Here is the text of the Fascist Manifesto. Italians, here is the program of a sane Italian movement, revolutionary because anti-dogmatic and anti-demagogical, strongly innovative because anti-prejudicial. We place the valorization of revolutionary war above everything and everyone. Yeah. The other problems, bureaucratic, administrative, legal, educational, colonial, etc., we will chart when we have created the ruling class. For this we want, for the political problem, universal suffrage by regional list voting with proportional representation, voting and eligibility for women. Minimum age for voters lowered to 18, minimum age for deputies lowered to 25.
Okay.
The abolition of the Senate, the convening of a National Assembly for the duration of 3 years, whose first task is to establish the form of the state constitution. The formation of national technical councils of labour, industry, transportation, social, hygiene, communications, etc., elected by the professional or trade communities with legislative powers and the right to elect a general commissioner with ministerial powers.
Good idea.
So far, all sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
For the social problem, we want the prompt reenactment of a state law enshrining the legal 8-hour workday for all jobs, minimum wages, the participation of workers' representatives in the technical operation of industry, the entrusting to the proletarian organizations themselves, who are morally and technically worthy, of the management of public industries or services.
Yeah.
The speedy and complete settlement of the railroad workers and all transportation industries. A necessary amendment of the disability and old age insurance bill by lowering the age limit, currently proposed at 65 to 55.
Sounds good.
Nothing to complain about there, really.
No.
On the military issue, we want the establishment of a national militia with brief educational services and exclusively defensive duty. The nationalisation of all arms and explosive factories.
Makes sense.
A national foreign policy intended to enhance, in the peaceful competitions of civilization, the Italian nation in the world.
Sounds good.
They want to be peaceful.
Yeah. And they're proud of their culture. They should be. They should, step out on the world stage.
And they want a national army, a national militia.
Yeah, for defense.
To defend the country.
For defense. Yeah. Sounds good.
For defense.
Sounds good. Yeah.
For the financial problem, we want a strong, extraordinary tax on capital of a progressive nature, having the form of true partial expropriation of all wealth, the seizure of all property of religious congregations, and the abolition of all diocesan benefices, which constitute a huge liability for the nation and a privilege of the few.
Sounds good.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Take away all the church's property. Fuck the church.
Yeah.
They had too much wealth in Italy for too long
and
used it for their own benefit, not for the people.
Gotta go. Yeah.
The revision of all war supply contracts and the seizure of 85% of war profits.
Love it, Jerry. Love it. 85% minimum. Yeah, let's go give back to the people. Let's take care of the people. Again, I'm listening to all this. I'm like, yeah. Now, and I don't want to start a whole new conversation here, but achieving all of these through a violent fascism government, I don't know about that. But as you can see, Mussolini and others were like, we have a lot of problems. We need big answers, and we think this is the way to go. But their goals are noble. What was it? Oh shit, I can't remember his name right now. I'll edit that out. But during the speech, during the Shakespeare speech, when Caesar is killed, Brutus is an honorable man. Mussolini was. It seems like Mussolini was sincerely trying to help his country.
So let's end episode 2 of that there. Episode 3, we'll get back to the birth and the growth of the fascist movements after World War I.